The relationship between men and mental health has often been called a silent crisis. On this podcast, we're breaking the silence. Welcome to Mental Health. It's time to talk. Here's your host, Allan Kehler.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in on today's show. We have a man who has earned his freedom from a life battling addictions. We have a musician. We have a very proud father. Yes, today we have Daniel Hearn. Daniel, welcome.
What's up, everybody? Hey, Al.
Now, Daniel, you have shared publicly that you've had quite the extensive background when it comes to drug use. And I'm curious, at what point did you realize that that was starting to spiral out of control?
Well, I remember obsessing about alcohol years before my first use. I was so curious. I was like, asking my dad, what does vodka taste like? What does rye taste like? What's it like to be drunk? And he'd get mad at me. So, really, I feel like it was out of control before my first drink. I got drunk the first time when I was 13. I made a mess of myself. But I loved it, quite honestly, I pissed my pants. I made a huge mess. And then I went to school the next day or on Monday and I bragged about it. I thought I was a hero, So the insanity was rooted in from the start, really. And it became about getting drunk all week. It was my job to have enough money and to have someone to get the alcohol for me, ever since then. And that carried on until I was in high school. And then in high school, I started smoking weed. I moved to Saskatoon. And within a few months of living in Saskatoon, I was smoking weed every day, before school, at break, during lunch. It was an all-day event for me. And that just carried on into my working career. When I was in my 20s, I think I was 22 or 23, I started doing into the harder stuff, cocaine and a little bit of meth. And it just, I held it together, or I thought I was holding it together. As long as I had the dope, I was okay. I never really felt like I fit in, but dope gave me that. So, I became a successful welder. Was working in northern Alberta, northern Saskatchewan. And the funny thing is that when I would go up north to work, I wouldn't use. But when I came back to Saskatoon, I was in that social setting again where I felt like something was missing, and I just craved it. I had to have it. If I was going to have fun, I had to have my dope, and that was the end of it, And as soon as I was in 2008, there was a big layoff, and we came back. Or I came back to Saskatoon full time, and I met someone, and we just dove off a cliff together. I was running a welding company, and that burned to the ground, and it just spiraled until I lost the company. I wasn't able to hold down a job. I resorted to dumpster diving, and I did that for a couple of years. You can live in a house for 2 years before they can actually kick you out. Yeah, you can. I owned the house, and I just stopped making payments. And I just, I got into this cycle where I had to get high so I could stay up all night dumpster diving to make enough money to get high so that I could stay up all night dumpster diving. And it just cycled. It was just a cycle of it was a disaster, and in that mix, we had a child. And when he was 3, somebody must have called us in. Something happened, because one day a couple of social workers and a couple of police officers showed up at our home. They came in, they looked around, they found a pipe, they found some dope, and they took my son. Just it was a normal day. Call it normal, I guess. It was just another day, and suddenly my son's gone. just like that, you know? And a couple of weeks later, my partner left me, and some really terrible shit happened. And, you know, and that terrible stuff, it slowly went away. The people that were doing these things to me, I don't know if they got bored of tormenting me or whatever, but it just got real quiet. You know, nobody was left. Nobody was around. It was just me. There's no heat in the house in the middle of winter. And one day, my mother, she shows up and she takes me out for lunch. And she starts scheming with me. She starts telling me these things that I should be doing. She's like, Dan, you need to go back up north, you know, and you need to save up some money, and you need to get yourself a safe place to stay, and you need to get your son back. You need to get a nice home for him. And I'm sitting there, and even in my psychosis, I was like, whoa. And I stopped. I'm like, don't I need to get clean first? She's like, yes. And she pulls out a form that's already filled out, and she puts it on the table like that. And she's like, sign right there. So in 10 days, I was in detox. That was the day I walked into detox was February 12th, 2017. And yeah, I haven't used since then. You know, I went to treatment. I did what the ministry told me to. As soon as I was out of treatment, I got into a sober living house, you know, and whatever they wanted, I did. I'm like, what do you want? What do you need? What do you need? You know, it wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about what I wanted. It was about what I needed and what my son needed, what I needed to be for my son. Within 6 months, I had my son back full time.
That's incredible. It's remarkable. It's a remarkable journey, and props to Mom. You know, people who struggle with addiction, there's this little window, isn't there, Daniel, where all of a sudden we can have those moments of clarity, but in those moments of clarity, there has to be action taken immediately. And obviously your mom understood that and had a plan in place.
Yes, she absolutely did. And you're right. We're an impulsive breed, you know. We want something, we want it right now. And that goes like when we're using and we have that moment like, oh, this sucks. I want something better. We need it right now, you know? So, yeah. And you know, the stars aligned and she was ready, you know, she knows a thing or two about addiction. So
yeah, she does. Now here's where my mind goes. You mentioned that you had your son for 3 years before there started to be a turning point in some of your behaviors. There are a lot of people, Daniel, who scratch their head and say, how the hell could you continue to lead a life of destruction when you've brought a child into this world? How do you help people to explain how our minds work when we are active in our addiction?
Well, I mean, I was on methadone when my son was born. And, you know, I don't know if I can accurately explain the insanity. I've been using for so long that it felt abnormal not to. You know, it felt wrong. I felt wrong when I wasn't high. You know, I didn't know how to face reality. And I thought the dope gave me that layer that I needed. So that I could, like I said, so that I could go out and do the work that I thought I needed to do, so that I could provide for my family like I thought I was, but I wasn't. All I was doing was paying for dope, you know? But the insanity is like, I'm working really hard, so I must be getting somewhere, you know? So as far as, I mean, the disease is, it's a selfish thing. It's all about me. You know, it's all about how I feel about things. It's how I feel about my son. I feel better when I'm high. You know, the drugs weren't the problem. The drugs were the solution. The real problem was deeper, was something inside of me that I didn't know how to fix.
Yeah. It's very interesting. You know, you talk about the insanity, and I remember I had a client who said to me, it's as though there's this burning piece of paper on the ground and I don't want to pick it up, but instinctively I find myself just continuously picking it up and getting burned repeatedly. And at the end of the day, you know, with this disease, it's like our brain screams for what it says we need, not want, and it becomes hardwired that way. And it seems so simple on the outside. You know, how many times, I'm sure, like, did people just say, Daniel, just stop, right? Just stop. Okay. I mean, this is equivalent to stopping to breathe. And like you said, that was your norm. Then
Absolutely.
comes the point that exactly that. It's like, what lies beneath? And fair to say that for most people, it would be pain.
You know, I'm not really sure where my pain came from. I didn't have a terrible upbringing. I wasn't raised in like an extremely dysfunctional home like you hear so many other addicts have, you know, all of this childhood trauma and stuff, and that's terrible. But in my case, I'm not really sure. Like, I feel like I was one of the people that was just sort of born with it. Like, I never felt right. From as young as I can remember, I would always wonder why nobody liked me. I thought nobody liked me, you know? But looking back now, it wasn't that. It's just I thought differently, you know?
Well, and I remember in one of our conversations, Daniel, you shared with me that you always wished that you were something other than that which you were, right? It's like there was something missing.
Whatever I had, I wanted more. The friends that I had, I always wanted different friends, you know, like nothing. I was never happy with who I was. I was never anchored to anything. There was always something missing, and I didn't know how to find it. But the pain that I experienced in my addiction, it forced my hand. You know, it forced me to come face to face with whatever this is, and say I got to change or I'm going to die. You know, and I needed my son needs a dad, and for some divine reason, that registered with me when I was still crazy. You know, and I don't know what clicked, because like you said, I was a dad. I was, you know, he was alive for 3 years and he lived in terrible conditions, you know, like there's cleaner places to sleep on the street than what was in that house. It was terrible. So,
and that's the thing that's, I think people on the outside looking in, again, have such a hard time wrapping their head around, because from what I know about you, Daniel, and I guarantee from what other people perceive, is you are a loving, nurturing soul who takes immense pride in being a father. The problem is that in active addiction, it's almost as though our soul seems to go into hibernation. And what we talked about before, you know, the addiction trumps everything and we become self-absorbed. But I'm curious because as a father myself, I think about having to lose a child, and then I think about fighting to get him back. What was it like for you, Daniel, when you were able to get your son back?
You mean the day that he came back to my care?
The day he came back, yeah.
It was surreal. It was, see, when I was early in my recovery, I still didn't, I don't know what was driving me, you know, because I didn't have the emotion. I didn't feel love, but something inside of me said, you have to do this. Like you just, there was no choice. There was no arguing. And when it happened, I mean, it was wonderful. I mean, that was the first time that I felt the very first times that I felt genuine love was with my son. And I've had lots of relationships throughout my life, but I never knew what love actually felt like, to actually put something in front of myself, you know? So when I got a taste of that, I was like, yeah, I want more of that. You know? Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of addiction has to do with connection. And you shared from a very early age, there was just something missing. Then the reason that you turn to dope is because you're trying to connect with those people, right? And it's beautiful to see and hear that you are then able to connect with your son and feel love. Was it a struggle for you to feel as though you were worthy of love?
No, actually, that wasn't it. It was a struggle for me to learn how to love consistently.
Hmm.
Because like we were saying earlier, we're impulsive. 1 minute I'm like, oh, I love him so much. Next minute I'm like, God damn, I wish he'd shut up. So it took me a while to learn how to love when I didn't feel like loving. Because I mean, it's not all rainbows. Parenting and life in general. I mean, you don't love everyone all the time. But learning that consistency to be there for a reason other than yourself. That is, and it's funny. The other day I was talking with a good friend about character defects, and we were talking, and it was said that we are supposed to remove. We're supposed to ask to have these character defects removed. We're supposed to remove them. What if they're not character defects? What if we're just using them wrong? This drive I have to feel better. Maybe I use that to get high. That's where my drive was. I just put that drive in a different direction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, we are incredibly creative individuals when we're active in our addictions. We have to, unfortunately, begin to manipulate, tell some lies to get what it is that we need. And to your point, if we can channel some of that creativity in a different way, OMG, watch out.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Shauna's chiming in here, Daniel. She says, thanks for sharing your story. You are an amazing dad. And
thank you.
Terry Lynn says, OMG, I'm in tears. You and Graydon are an incredible team. And, it's incredible. It is absolutely incredible to see this turning of a corner, because no doubt, Daniel, for how many years were people hoping, praying, wishing, and they wanted it for you, but until you want it for yourself, then change cannot happen.
I didn't even see it at the time. I thought I was only hurting me, and I didn't even realize how badly I was hurting me, but I've heard it so many times. Oh, I'm not hurting anyone. My drug use is it's only hurting me. Right. And I was like that. I didn't see that. Looking back now, holy cow. I don't know how they didn't just kill me.
A lot of love, a lot of patience.
Oh, unbelievable. My family, wow. Like strong people. And I'm so fortunate to have the supports that I have in my life. So fortunate.
That's everything. Yeah. And to learn a new way to live, a new way to talk, to surround ourselves with people who actually bring us up, not down. And now you've started to surround yourself with people in an educational setting who, have the same goals as you do to become a substance abuse professional. Why was it that you made the decision to become a substance abuse professional and take a message into the workplace?
Well, I mean, I've seen how people are treated with substance use disorders in the workplace. I know how I've been treated, very, very. I think one time I had a supervisor approach me and be like, man, are you okay? And the weird thing is that one time that happened, I wasn't using. That was when I was working up north, and I was just really tired because, when I was up north, I would work out. Like I would wake up early in the morning and I would work out like a savage, like it was just, it was the ego and the insanity, I got to be super ripped. I got to be super, skinny, and I got to look super, like it was the insanity just manifesting in a different way. So, I've lost plenty of jobs where I was fired based on the behavior, and rightfully so. You know, I can't blame them because like I tarnished reputations, I wrecked product, I did, you know, like I was high, but nobody ever asked me, can we help you? What is happening? You're not, like, something's going on here, man. Like, talk to us. We'd like to help you.
Yeah, and I mean, we're not talking about a year. We're talking about 16 years as a welder, yes?
Yeah.
And so why do you think that it was so difficult for people to have that discussion with you or to express that concern? Because I'm going to guess that people legitimately were concerned, but what was the barrier for them?
Well, first of all, it's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to have that conversation, you know. Now, I can't speak for them, you know. I tend to think it's a lack of education, stigma, definitely stigma. There's no hope for him. Why even bother trying, you know? And another thing is cost. It's expensive. You know, it's expensive for a company to have an employee assessed, and then, you know, they have to pay for certain things in their treatment plan and then their return to work plan. You know, a return to work plan can be a long, drawn out process. And then there's you know, random drug tests, and there's planning around that, disability management. You know, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to approach. But that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, to make it a little easier, to make it a little clearer for people, you know.
Exactly. You know, Wendy says, imagine if supervisors or owners asked how you were doing and what's going on instead of firing you. And I think that that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to provide some insight, education. You have the perspective of the person who is struggling, and now you're going to have some professional training as well. But what is it that you would have loved to hear from supervisors or people around you in the workplace? What would have helped you?
Well, what would have helped me is not what I would have wanted to hear at the time.
True, but what would it have looked like?
Now, the best thing that ever happened to me was some really bad shit. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
I didn't come sliding into recovery because I'm like, oh, this is awesome, I think I'll quit, you know? So, some straightforward talk, you know? We think you're high. We're going to drug test you. And if you fail, we're going to try and help you. You know? But if we can't help you, then we can't have you doing safety sensitive work. And that's the bottom line, man. So if you want to work with us, we're happy to work with you. We're happy to try and help you because we want you here. But we got to make a decision.
And it's one thing to just have the conversation. It's another to have the conversation and offer some compassion and, dare I say, the word love, right? Because you are not just an employee, you are a human being who is worthy and deserving of being seen, heard, and supported.
Absolutely. And I mean, my approach might be a little bit harsh. Like I'm human, you know, but what worked for me was a little bit like what drove me in my recovery, and the people that I really admire and respect are the ones that will say, Dan, you're fucking up. You know what I mean? That's what I need. That's what works for me.
Yeah.
You know?
And I guess that is what makes the world go round. Some of us need that straight shooter, and others require more of a delicate approach, but you're going to find out pretty quick what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
I also know that you've seen your fair share of ways that people can bring drugs into the workplace. And I used to do drug and alcohol training for different companies, and I would bring different props. Are there certain ways in which you've seen people get rather creative? Because I'm not saying this for the sake of trying to give people ideas. I'm saying this so that people can open up their eyes and see how this is right in front of them often.
Yeah. Well, for me, like I didn't see anyone else using on job sites. Like I never used with people on job sites. I mean, when I was a teenager, we would smoke weed together. But like when it progressed into other things, like I didn't want to share my stuff. So I wouldn't tell it, you know. So, but I would just have little containers. Like you can get those little pill containers at drugstores. And I would just crush my stuff up in the morning and I would put it in that pill container and, you know, I'd go to the bathroom throughout the day and, you know, but I mean, I've heard people, and when I went up north, I never took anything with me. You know, I still don't understand how I was able to just stop for 3 weeks straight every month. But I've heard people. I was talking with a friend a few weeks ago. He said he would take his deodorant apart and put it inside his deodorant stick, and then put it in his bag. And I mean, he said the dogs didn't even smell it. So,
yeah, exactly. Now I'm going to do a little bit of quick show and tell for those of you who are on the podcast later for audio only. This will be a little different, but for those of you who are seeing the video, let me just give you a demonstration because what you're talking about is, you know, the deodorant. Now this looks like a legitimate bottle of Aquafina water. Yes, shakes
looks
everything.
delicious.
But yes, when you do a little twist, you can see how inside there's a compartment. And the thing is, I have this in Coke bottles. I have this in WD-40 where you just screw off the bottom, liquid gunk.
How come you got so many of those, Al?
I told you it was the training that I was doing. And the only reason that I used to share this was so that people could see how it's being brought in and maybe to have their eyes open. And here's another thing. We talked about this before, but this, you know, when you talk about the drug testing, there are ways in which people try to get creative. And this one is something called Quick Fix. It's synthetic urine. You can actually go to UrinLuck, YOUREIN luck.com. Very clever. But you can actually then see how this is used, right? And you kind of put this around the belt. You have the synthetic urine in a container. You even have a heat pack, if you can see that, because if somebody's urine is coming out cold, that might be problematic. But
they measure,
again,
they measure the temperature, right? Like as soon as you hand it over.
Right. Now they're starting to do accurate testing, but it's unbelievable how people are getting this stuff in, but it demands attention because, as you said earlier, safety is what trumps everything.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
I think another reason why sometimes I feel, in my experience, that people are hesitant is because if there is an actual problem, like if a substance abuse professional deems that the person has a problem, then there's a duty to accommodate, right? And that's where it gets into the whole technical terms, which is why you're going to school and there's a whole model for that. But there is no one way for people in recovery. And that's also why it gets so challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and the duty to accommodate, to go into undue hardship is hard. You know, you have to bend over backwards to accommodate somebody with a disability, you know, and that includes spending all kinds of money on these accommodations, like treatment, you know, modified work program, allowing them time off to go to programming, to see counselors, you know, and that requires other employees in the workplace to modify their work program to accommodate the time you're missing, you know. So it can get really complicated, you know.
Yeah. And on the other hand, you know, it's also wise to invest in someone, especially someone who's been with the company for a long time. And what I have found, and studies show this time and time again, that when somebody has been given that, whatever you want to call it, second, third chance, when someone took the time to care for them and they come back to that place of work, they want to give back like nobody else, right? It's like that validation was there.
Yeah. And it goes beyond, I mean, see, if we could educate people in such a way that they would, that they could see the lost money due to, the guy's missing a day of work every week, or the person. And when they do show up, they're not fit anyways. They're either they're using, or they're hungover, or they're dope sick, and they're not performing at their best. They're making mistakes, and they're costing the company money. If we could educate employers to use early recognition techniques to approach problems before they come to a breaking point, that's money well spent. You can spend it here and have a more productive, healthier, happier workforce, or you can wait until shit falls apart, and then you risk tarnished reputation, you risk bigger workers' compensation fees, and you could really hurt someone. Turning a blind eye, you could kill someone.
Yeah. I think you're the perfect person to do this. I love that you have this drive and ambition to shatter the stigma and the stereotypes. You put a face and a voice to substance use disorders, and you bring the credibility, and I think that will be the relatability. And there's going to be people in the workplace too who are struggling and who will be able to connect to your story. And I mean, you're just taking life and running, and it is pretty cool for me and a lot of us to sit back and just watch what's happening, because you are rechanneling all of those talents and skills and abilities. And I don't know if it's about making up for lost time, but much respect. What are some of the other things that you have on the go?
Well, I have started a podcast myself. I've developed a clothing brand. I am in school for Occupational Health and Safety. I am working towards my ICADC. I want to say internationally certified alcohol and drug counselor.
That's fancy.
Yeah. So, and I'm on my way to be a substance abuse professional. I'm developing awareness training, PowerPoints, things like that. I've got one developed for opioids and naloxone training. And I am moving into cannabis awareness. And I think that's all. I think there's some more, but that's all I can think of off the top of my head.
Oh, and you are a father. So you have a few things on your plate.
Yes, I'm a father, yes.
It's incredible. Shauna chimes in, says she's proud of you. We got Michelle saying congratulations, and that's just it. It's like you literally, in my opinion, have earned your freedom and continue to do so. There's an interesting question, and I hear this a lot, and I'm sure that you do. One of the questions is, what would you say to someone, Daniel, who's at that point where they just feel like giving up?
They feel like giving up?
Yeah.
I would say the fight ahead of you is not easy, but it's worth it. And I know if they're talking to me that they want to change, and if you think you can't, then you're right. If you think that just maybe you can, then that's hope, And if we can channel just a little bit, like if we can spend a quarter of the amount of energy in our recovery as we did trying to find our dope, nothing can stop us. I mean, Allan, look at what you've done. It's incredible what we can do with the drive that we find when we make a decision, So what would I say? I would say, don't give up. You're not allowed to quit. This is only the beginning. There's lots of life left. You just got to make a decision.
Yeah, well said. Thank you for sharing that. It's daunting. It's overwhelming to think about sobriety, recovery early on. And that's why, in the program, it's kind of that one day at a time, sometimes one moment at a time. But I don't know what that quote is. I read it a couple days ago. This is the problem with ADD. It's kind of like telling a joke. I just get to the punchline and I blow everything. but it's something something to do with 1,000 miles starts with the first step, or and that's exactly what you're saying. It's like, don't quit, and kind of just, it's a process.
And you can't do it alone.
Yeah.
You can't. I've never seen it.
Yeah. I know that in your clothing brand, some of your handles on social media, it's Daniel Unmanageable. And just lastly, do you mind sharing why you chose to associate the word unmanageable with not only your brand, but social media handle?
Well, I would love to talk about that.
Off you go.
In my program of recovery, one of the first things that I had to do was that I had to admit that my thoughts, that my actions, that my life had become unmanageable. And I use that name to remind me every day, because I look at social media every day, that it's just one step away. That unmanageability is it's waiting for me outside, and it's doing push-ups. The stronger I get, the stronger it's going to get. So it's my job to stay ahead of it, get a little better every day. And that's why I use that name.
Yeah, that's awesome. Shaden makes a comment. He says, Allan, there's a website called ADD and Loving It. Check it out if you have time. Shaden, I have had to sit down and watch that. My wife, Tanya, made me sit down, and she would often be like, hey, that's you. I was in denial. I am starting to accept it. Oh, and Kimberly, thank you. Kimberly has nailed the quote. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
There it is.
I feel like I pretty much said that.
Kind of said that. I think she said it just a little bit better though.
I'm in denial. Lastly, if people want to learn a bit more about you, whether that's the music, you've created some beautiful music recently, actually featured on Telemiracle, yes, representing well. So if people want to follow you or get a hold of you, what would that look like?
Well, you can find me on Facebook. It's Daniel Unmanageable, just exactly how it sounds. I have a YouTube channel. If you go on YouTube and you type in Daniel Unmanageable, my personal channel will pop up, and there's videos in there of me singing just on my couch. There's videos in there with my son. There's my podcast channel. So you can check that out if you want. I've got some interesting guests on there. We talk about some crazy stuff. Other than that, danielunmanageable@gmail.com. If you want to talk to me about anything, that's where to grab me.
Okay, you have put the invite out there. I hope that people follow up. Daniel, thank you so much for taking this time. I have much respect for the work that you're doing, both personally and professionally. I'm excited to see where you take life.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It was an honor to be on here. And thanks for watching, everyone.
Thank you and goodbye, everyone. Take good care and be well.